again to yet another edition of the Urban Algorithm on the Our World Media Network. Good afternoon, I'm Wayne Gilman, and after a long absence, we're back in the saddle again, all the way from beautiful downtown South Jamaica, Queens, on a very snowy February 19th, 2022. And we would have been on a little earlier than this, but I have to give credit. You know, we have a staff here at the Our World Media Network. No one gets paid, including myself. I always get tickets on the Long Island Railroad last class, if they still have that. But our Emmy award-winning videographer, Joey Swift, and his partner, Naomi. Naomi, I know you have a last name. Peters, yeah. I know some Peters. I hope you're not related. Anyhow, but thank God we were able to get on this afternoon. And I have two very, very special guests. One who's been on with us quite a few times since we started the show, retired New York City Chief of Police, Wilbur Chapman. And joining us this afternoon is a longtime friend, someone I've known equally as long and has been very helpful throughout my career. Retired New York City veteran detective, Mark D. Patterson. And Mark I met 1,000 years ago when he was working as in the department of the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, DCPI. And Bill, I've just followed your career because it's been well documented and noted. And if it's not, Mark reminds me. But I am so glad to have you both on. I mean, this is long overdue. And I mean, I'm going to try to see if we could put a zipper on the humor for a moment. It is, as I mentioned, 2022, February. We're actually a month and 3 weeks, I believe, into the new year and the new administration at New York City Hall. Now, I know this is a global audience, but it seems like a lot that goes on in this country and around the world emanates from New York. And we have a new mayor. His name is Eric Adams. And Eric was a former New York City police officer, a decorated officer, if memory serves. And now he's the mayor of New York City. And I think the last time we spoke, Bill, we were in the midst of a primary. Yeah. And over the summer, you know, he was odds-on favorite for the Democratic Party to get the nod and to get in. And I really feel that there really was not much of a contest because his opponent was not really focused on politics. But, you know, as a Republican, I'm a little biased. I'm pro-Democrat, and that's not going to change. But I know before Eric assumed the responsibility, we were both looking at what was going on in the cities, and particularly in New York, because, I mean, we've had a record number of shootings. The violence is off the charts, and I think anyone who was around reading the news last month, or the latter part of last month, when we lost two police officers, there were rookie cops, I believe, that were ambushed at a Harlem apartment. I mean, anyone who has any ounce of blood in their veins had to, you know, it was just such a disgusting experience to witness and to hear it constantly repeated on TV and what the families have gone through. So I think I'm going to start there. Both of you, if I had a hat on, I'd take my hat off because I know, Mark, you and I have talked about it. Bill, I mean, you've been in the thick of it. Where do we begin now? I guess the question is, was that something that could have been avoided?
Bill, you want to take this or you want me to go first? Go ahead.
Bill, I'll ask you.
Well, it's difficult to look at the way things are now and not look at the history over the last 20 years. That's been detrimental to the New York City Police Department, probably the finest law enforcement agency in the world, bar none. The street crime unit was quadrupled and 138 very skilled people were blown up into 500 people, some of them who did not have experience. And as a result, the death of Amadou Diallo occurred. And the reaction from the public was overwhelming to do away with the street crime unit, which is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Then we go through 8 years of a mayor who ran on the ticket of being anti-police. And probably the only successful thing he did in his administration was to make the police department organizationally impotent, and did away with the precinct anti-crime units, which are a vital tool necessary in combating gun violence. So now you have a new mayor coming in, luckily he has police experience, who has to deal with the challenges of, one, a totally demoralized rank and file that forced most of its legal weapons to go after criminals who use guns aggressively. And you have still an element in the Democratic Party that's talking about defund the police, which is an absolutely ridiculous notion. As a result, we had 2 police officers massacred. We had others shot. And January and February, which are traditionally very easy months to police because the weather cooperates, have probably been the most violent in the last 15 or 20 years. So there's a real challenge ahead. And the mayor has to win over the rank and file, get them focused, and get them out there and supported so they can do the job that they were hired to do, which is keep New Yorkers safe.
And Mark, if I could just segue to you, when we last spoke, I had just gotten off the phone with a longtime friend of mine, a fellow journalist, Peter Noel from the Village Voice, and Peter and I were arguing about what had gone down. His position was that he felt that why did the NYPD send 2 rookies to that site? And your take?
My take is Peter's wrong. And I say that respectfully. Peter is wrong. The NYPD has been putting rookies together on posts, riding in cars for a long time. Now, you asked that question, what could have went wrong? What did go wrong? Nothing went wrong other than that the bad guy shouldn't have had a gun. They've done this many of times. I've done this many of times as a police officer where you respond to a domestic incident. The family is separated. One police officer goes and talks to the other family member. So if you remember, Wayne, there was 3 police officers there that day.
Right.
One police officer talks to the family. The other 2 cops, Jason and Wilbur, go down the corridor. This guy came out blasting. They did nothing wrong other than doing their job, and they were simply ambushed.
And that could have been anybody.
As far as putting 2 rookies together, that's nothing new. We're not going to put the blame on the NYPD. We're not going to put the blame on the cops. Strictly the bad guy there.
Gotcha. And I happen to agree. I still am trying to grapple and fathom what Peter's position was with this, but if you're ambushed, it doesn't matter how many years experience you have.
That's correct.
I would assume that you're in a bad spot at the wrong time. It's like the young Asian woman waiting on the platform of the subway station in Manhattan and being pushed by a homeless person. I'm certain she would have done it if there was some sort of indication where she could have avoided being pushed over. I'm certain she would have done that. But sometimes things happen, and that's not just to, dismiss the issue, but we have a real bad problem here in New York, and it's echoed throughout the country. Do you think we're up for the task now with the change in leadership, Bill?
Well, we have an interesting combination. We have a brand new police commissioner who was well thought of in Nassau County, who was clearly eloquent when she addresses the members of the department. But we also have a department where really the rank and file, as I said before, has to be sold. They have to buy in. What made the department successful in the 90s was not only the addition of 5,000 officers, was the fact that all of the officers in the department felt that they were supported by the administration and by the people in the city. If anything good has come out of this tragedy of the assassination of the 2 officers, it's the fact that the members of the community are now being vocally supportive of the police, and that helps officers do their job appropriately in a time when people seem to think that gun violence is the norm. And they're going to have to work both through the community, through the political element, which is a problem, and through the district attorneys to have a comprehensive strategy to eliminate gun violence. And when people are arrested by the police for having guns illegally, they've got to be prosecuted and put away as long as possible.
So, as you mentioned, that brings up the touchy subject of bail reform. You know, I feel I understand why we have bail reform, but I also feel that I have not witnessed this violence since the days of the crack epidemic. You know, something's got to be done. You know, people should not be able to abuse someone and be turned away after they've been booked and placed on record and be allowed to go back out, I think, you know, but I understand why things have changed. You know, do you think, am I wrong to think that there should be some sort of, I wouldn't want to use the word relaxation, but a change with respect to how we're looking at bail?
Hey, you know, look, I agree with you, Wayne. Bail reform is a problem. There are certain crimes that it needs to be in the hands of the judge. The judge makes the decision who's going to be released and who's going to be held. It's up to the state legislators to get back in the room and figure this out. I understand what you're talking about. You know, a lot of police departments across this country, especially the smaller police departments, they use it as profit gaining for their agencies and for their respected cities. And there are also a number of people who commit minor violations that are in jail and they can't get out because they can't afford it.
Right.
That was a area of bail reform. But when you go over the line and you commit heinous crimes, leave it in the hands of the judges. The judges have to have that power to say, no, you're not going to be released. But the state law says, yeah, well, that's fine. The state law says, but no, you're not going to be released because if I release you, you're going to go back out there and do it again. And that's the issue that we have today. So the state legislators, the state senators, everybody, get back in the room and do it right. Do it right away.
No, I happen to agree, and I know that I live in the same district with Assembly Speaker Hesty, and it just seemed like, regardless of how many times the subject has been broached, you know, even in the media, that they are very resolute in their thinking that there's not going to be a change. You know, I understand the historical perspective, what we have gone through, but I mean, there are too many bodies on the street. I mean, too many people have fallen victim because something could have been stopped.
And it's happening every day. You know, you look at the news, no matter, you know, you're reading your local newspapers, tuning into television, listening to the radio. It's happening every day until Speaker Hastings gets back in the room, call a special gathering. Let's figure this out. We're going to have this problem. It's going to continue. The police officers' hands are tied. You know, I still talk to a lot of members of the police department, and one detective said to me, "Mark, I locked this guy up last week. I was still in court, and he was released before I got out of court."
That must be frustrating. You know, I'm Bill. I just want you to come back into the conversation with respect to that. I'm assuming your position is similar to Mark's. You know.
Well, I'll go a little further. Back in the 90s, and I realized that policing has just been invented last year because of all the bright minds we now have. But back in the old days, when we actually carried 6 shooters and engaged with people, it was a thing called federal days in the Bronx because the gun violence was so overwhelming and it was not being handled in a very efficient manner by the Bronx DA. The federal government came in, and if you were arrested for possession of a gun, there was a mandatory sentence. You did federal time. And that was very effective in reducing the incident of gun violence. So there's a quick fix right there by just asking the federal government to come in and trying people who have guns without upsetting the balance that people feel is historical in terms of the prejudice nature of the criminal justice system. If you carry a gun and you're not licensed, you should go to jail. If you use that weapon, you should go to jail even longer. And if you were arrested for a gun and you're a repeat offender, there should be no latitude. You go to jail because there's no reason for you to have that gun and walk around the streets and be a potential threat to people who are minding their business and being law-abiding. So that's a quick way of doing it. And the other part is, if as Mark says, the scholarly politicians who are state elected officials can go in the room and without upsetting the delicate balance can say, well, there's an exception for guns. If you carry a gun, give the same penalty they would if there were federal days. And that would be a fix that empowers police officers, makes citizens safer, and it doesn't mandate that the politicians compromise their delicate positions.
And I think everybody would be for that, except for the criminals. I don't understand that.
What they think.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I find so puzzling. And anyone who has an opposing point of view, they're welcome to join us on this conversation. It's live, but to me that just makes sense. And President Biden was here just recently, and it seems like the federal government is going to do something. I believe maybe that's something that both of you could explain, the involvement of the ATF.
Bill, you want to take this first? Okay.
Okay, I'm not going to. Okay, Mark.
No, I was going to yield Mark. I didn't want to dominate the conversation.
Yeah. Well, since you're on screen, Bill, we'll go with you.
The bottom line, policing has to be able to walk and chew gum. All right, you have to be able to enforce the laws against those who use guns inappropriately, but you also have to check to see where the weapons are coming from. So the ATF can be part of this multi-agency task force and track where the guns are coming from and if they're being shipped illegally and all of the other issues of violations of laws that are associated with it. The problem is that you have a national lobby and you have other states that aren't as strict in terms of gun possession and gun sales as New York. So maybe it's time for there to be a federal initiative, and it probably won't pass because we have Republicans who would veto it and are influenced by the NRA, to look at if you stole the gun to someone and it's used in the commission of a crime, then perhaps you're equally as liable as the person who pulls the trigger, holding them responsible. But that would require some federal legislation, and I don't know if politicians have the intestinal fortitude to actually go up and say what's right. After Newtown, when all those kids were massacred, when you didn't see a change in the law then, you said, what will it take before politicians wake up and realize that you can't just turn your back and let gun violence continue to happen?
I agree, and I was so happy to see an outcome to one of the cases involving what happened in Connecticut. I think it was Remington, if I'm not mistaken. One of the gun manufacturers has got a tremendous penalty to pay, and I think that's where the rubber meets the road, that you have to make them, you hit them where it hurts, I have a friend I have a couple of friends in the state of Virginia, and I'm still amazed. They want me to leave New York to come down there. They said the quality of life is better, so they say. But it's a state of open carry, and I'm a little concerned about that. I'm talking the wrong.
with good reason.
Yeah. If I continue, I absolutely agree with everything Commissioner Chapman says. Let me add this. I hear, and this bothers me a lot. Mark, the guns are being brought into our communities. Mm-hmm. It's not our people in our communities. The guns are being brought there. Yeah, okay, the guns are. I agree with you, but you still have to pull the trigger. So you got to take some responsibility. And what I don't hear, Wayne, is the politicians standing up and saying to the communities, hey, folks, take a look at yourselves. Look at your neighbor to the right. Look at your neighbor to the left. They might be the problem. Yeah, the guns are coming from down south. that pipeline up the I-95 pipeline or other means, because it's easy to bring a gun from the south to the north. I've done it legally without being checked, which is remarkable. But at some point, the responsibility starts with us also.
Yeah.
We're destroying our neighborhoods. We're killing our neighbors. Kids, 1-year-old babies are getting shot by stray bullets. A couple of weeks ago, we had a kid in a car with the parents stopping at the store in the Bronx,
right,
and a stray bullet because two knuckleheads are shooting at each other. So the responsibility has to go on us too. So everybody, well, the guns are coming from down south. Yeah, okay. But we're still firing the guns. We're still pulling the trigger. So the politicians need to stand up to its constituents and say, hey, we're part of the problem. And once we realize that we are part of the problem, this is going to stop.
And I agree. I mean, I certainly catch hell from some people who feel that, we should not look at ourselves. The problem is larger than that. But I think that's one of there's a lack of self-respect, number one, and there's a decadence out here with regard to the younger generation where they don't care. I don't get it, and maybe I sound old school. I mean, I sound like one of my parents, and I always, I grew up in the same neighborhood Commissioner Chapman is from, Bed-Stuy, and back in the day, my parents would always tell me that if I had access to a gun, there's always a likelihood that you would use it, and everyone that I grew up with who had that ability to make a connection and get something legal, that, I can't begin to tell you how many people that I've known coming up who are no longer with us because of how that neighborhood was way back when. I'm talking about the 1960s. I remember going through riots on Fulton Street back in the day. Those of you who come from Brooklyn would understand what I'm talking about. But, I never thought, with all the progress that we made, and the one thing I will say, I'm not an avid fan of the new and so-called improved Rudolph Giuliani, but when he got into the position as being mayor, and he introduced the quality of life element to go after those little crimes, I thought he was on to something. And that's not to take away from his predecessor, David Dinkins, because I think a lot started with him. And I know both of you can comment on that. And so, Bill, I'm going to give it to you again.
Well, the bottom line is law enforcement and protection of the people of the city does not come out of the police commissioner's office or the mayor's office. They're the talking heads. The people who do the work are the police officers who work in the radio cars, in the precincts, in the PSA, and in the transit districts. They're the ones who get the job done because they're the ones who know their communities and put their lives on the line responding to these calls where they could be in danger. As far as minor violations are concerned, the problem with enforcing them is that you wind up going back to the old adage, what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the easiest thing to do? And there's a racial bias. If you look at Mayor Bloomberg, who inherited a terrific police department, every time the men and women went out and did what they were supposed to do and reduce crime, Bloomberg reduced the head count. And it got to the point where the department had to respond in a way, and that's how we wound up with 500,000 black and brown people being stopped and frisked inappropriately because it became a pressure situation to keep the same level of enforcement with fewer people. So you have to be careful how you selectively enforce. Stop, question, and frisk is the law. It should be used to make sure that those people who would commit crimes or are about to commit crimes are interdicted ahead of time. And if they have weapons, those weapons are removed. The political community controls what police do, unfortunately. And right now, we're in a place where unless the political community wakes up and stops talking about the funding and starts to back their police officers, but hold them to a standard that other police officers who do the right thing naturally can be proud of, we're going to wind up with continued violence, a lack of enforcement, and a lack of prosecution afterwards. So it's a real issue. You know, there's a lot of talking points, precision policing and the Rudo Giuliani way. No, there's the NYPD way, and that's the right way to do things. And unless the department is being steered in the wrong direction from City Hall, police officers know what to do, and they should be allowed to go out there and do what they should.
Commissioner Chapman, I thank you very much, and I'm glad that you clarified that, because it really wasn't the mayor, but somehow the mayor seemed to get a lot of attention once something seems to work the right way. We're going to stick a pin in it right now. We have some commercials that we have to air. You know, I'm ahead of or I should say I'm behind at this point, but that's how we started, behind. So I just want to take a break for a couple of minutes. We'll be back with more of this conversation right after this. You're listening to the Urban Algorithm on the Our World Media Network.
Make sure to download the WGJS radio app from the Apple Store or from the Google Play Store.
All right, how you guys doing?
Wait, how'd you get your video like that? Is that 4K or something?
Right, you got us over here looking like a hot mess.
No, it's actually a powerful live streaming app for Mac called Ecamm Live. You know what? Let me show it to you real quick. So you're able to use your mirrorless camera as a virtual webcam, and you can tweak the colors right in Ecamm Live using their camera effects, and then bring this video right into Zoom, Google Meet, and pretty much any other virtual meeting app. You can even stream directly to Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn and bring in comments right onto the video. And you can customize the look, size, and position of the comments right in the app. Or you can even add your logo to the corner of your video, or yourself, or both. There are plenty of picture-in-picture styles to choose from if you're sharing your screen for a tutorial or doing a presentation. And it doesn't have to be live. You can use it to record a course and eliminate the need to have to edit it later, all in 4K quality. And if you got a green screen, you can set it up right in Ecamm Live, and you can bring that into your different meetings. If you're feeling fancy, you can move yourself into the corner of your frame to do a commentary or a reaction video. You can even add in video clips just by dragging and dropping it in. Pretty much everything's drag and drop. Y'all follow me? Okay, good. So if you want to step it up a notch, you can add some overlays to your video, whether it's a simple graphic or you want to have some titles or other info at the bottom of your screen. You can even add animated overlays like this one or this one. And with Ecamm Live's interview mode, you have full control over the look and feel of your broadcast. And you can add branded overlays to frame you and your guests and look like a real legit broadcast. And you can save each layout as a scene and switch between them with the press of a button. And you know, these days between virtual meetings, school, live streams, we on video all the time. So you just want to show up in a way where you can be confident and proud of. And for me, Ecamm Live is at the center of it all. Did y'all get all that?
You were on mute.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out. But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's alive. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
real-world experience.
it's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe, it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. High blood pressure silently affects millions of Americans. Staying on top of your blood pressure is as simple as these 4 easy steps. Self-monitoring is power. Visit manageyourbp.org to learn more.
You get off the plane and you're like, wow, I'm alive.
You have to breathe because it's breathtaking.
It's the center of the world.
Brooklyn, Manhattan, Staten Island, Queens.
They have the Rockaways, the beach, the Flushing Meadow Park.
Small places that you never think exist.
From there, we'll go up to the Bronx.
Nature. Brooklyn. Got Coney Island. You get to happen upon things.
Yes.
Manhattan never gets outclassed.
Chelsea, Soho. Hay cosas ya de lujo. Es un área bien fancy, ¿me entiendes?
Go to the Empire State Building. Go to the top of Rockefeller Center.
Staten Island.
Staten Island, there's something for everybody.
New York City's an awesome place to come with family.
You got things for kids, you got things for adults.
Even like museums have amazing story times.
That's the beauty of this organic city. It creates new flavors of what once was coming from another country.
All of it. Everyone's welcome.
The biggest rainbow in the world.
Ελάτε New York.
Welcome once again to the Urban Algorithm. I'm your host, Wayne Gilman, on this Saturday, February 19th, 2022. And our special guests for this segment are two longtime friends, and I couldn't be happier, with regard to the subject matter that we're discussing, because I think about this every day. Before I hit the sack at night, and I wake up the next day and I read the, not the newspapers, but I go on TV and I look at my computer and all the crime stories. It just amazes me that I live in a city of 8 million people and we're blowing each other up for no reason at all. Welcome once again our special guest for this segment, retired New York City Chief of Police Wilbur Chapman and retired veteran New York City Detective Mark D. Patterson. And we were talking about a variety of things. We touched on the subject of the ATF, what Giuliani tried, or at least was attempting to get credit for back in the day. And when we juxtapose that with what's going on today, and since we have a global audience, we can't turn around and ignore recently the shooting that occurred in Minneapolis. I forgot the names of the principals involved with that. And then there was also a conviction of a veteran New York City police, veteran Minneapolis police officer. I think it was Minneapolis St. Paul, the department that she was in, and I the stun gun versus a handgun. Tell me, what does it feel like to be in a position like what she was in? Both of you.
Well, by the grace of God, I've never been in a position that she's in.
Okay.
And,
I'm sorry. I don't mean to. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mark.
No. I understand it. But look, you're a veteran cop. You got to know the difference between a stun gun and a firearm. It is plain and simple as that. I don't know what she was thinking that day. I have no idea why that happened. I honestly don't. But you have to know the difference between a firearm and a stun gun. The weight is significantly different. I believe the grip is significantly different. And by the way, I believe some of the police officers today in this country, they carry it opposite of their strong side. So if your firearm is on the right side, your stun gun should be on the opposite side. I don't know. Different police departments have different type of training, and the commissioner can explain training certainly more than I can, because he was the deputy commissioner of training in the NYPD and he ran 2 agencies. But if you saw the result of the judge when she was telling everybody why she came to that decision, she felt more compassion for the police officer.
Exactly.
And I don't understand that.
I was puzzled by it. She kept making references to the George Floyd situation. Commissioner, what do you think?
Well, when a training officer doesn't know the difference between a firearm and a taser, then you have real problems in your department. And that particular officer was a training officer. You know, as Mark said, for the grace of God, we didn't have to face that. I didn't have to face that kind of situation. And while I like to give police officers always the benefit of the doubt, we've seen some things that have made national attention where you wonder, what were they thinking? There's no way to rationalize some of that behavior. And I go back to my original premise that I've always said, policing is not a civil right. It is not an entitlement. It is an honor to represent your community and be a police officer. And not everybody in uniform should be there. And part of the reason why we have this problem now with defund the police is because we didn't police ourselves. Every good police officer in every department knows, and I'll use Mark's expression, who the knuckleheads are. Who the people that
knuckleheads are. Yep.
And they need to be purged from the ranks. And until they are, they will always supply ammunition to those who wish to attack the police and criticize misdeeds that people do in uniform. It's very clear. No one says anything about the district attorneys who send people of color away for 40 or 50 years for minor infractions, or, gee, they were innocent and we hid evidence. But police officers are on the front line. They're always exposed. They're always vulnerable. So therefore, departments should be very careful who they hire, how they train them, and how they monitor their performance while they're on duty.
Well, that's a very sensitive subject. I mean, it sounds like management is at fault. You know, usually if you know there's a bad apple in the bunch, you at least you'd like to isolate that person or at least have a sit-down conversation, figure out what's going on, and if they're not capable of continuing their responsibilities, you go.
I agree with you. I'm sorry, Bill. I agree with you. Get rid of them. If you let them stay around long enough, this is the end result. Somebody is going to get hurt. And let me just say this, Wayne. You know, policing across the country, it's a hard job. But what bothers me when you have something like this, the media never points out that police officers have 1,000 contacts with people every day doing their job. And you have less than 1% of incidents like this. Focus on the men and women out there who are doing a great job. And, who are in tough situations like this, and everything turns out all right. It's always the negative that is highlighted in the media. And let me just say one more thing. I'm going to be blunt here to my friends in the media. Anytime a Black person is shot by a white police officer, it is news. But it's never the other way around. Do you know what I mean?
I hear you. And as a person in the media for a number of years, I happen to agree. And it's always looked upon when the situation's in reverse from a completely different perspective, The whole thing with media, and one of my biggest issues, if it bleeds, it leads. That's been the expression for years, I don't know how to get around that. And I think one of the reasons why I dropped out after I put in a good almost 40 years at the time, because I saw what social media was doing and I see what it's done. I mean, there's some very good aspects of social media, but the whole fact-checking aspect of it, the fact that you have whole operations that are fully financed by people who basically, a large majority, don't look like us and don't think in the interest of people of color.
That's correct.
They have their own agenda. So that
is absolutely correct.
And to be honest with you, I mean, from a New York perspective, if we can get the Patrick Lynch, if we could have an ongoing commercial about the good things, that members of the department are doing on a regular basis, You know, I don't know if there's funding for that, but I think that message needs to be sent out because, you know, there's a lot that we need to, and I sound like as if I'm anti-black to a certain extent. We are not a monolith in our community. We have all sorts of streams of voices, and I think that there are a lot of conservatives here. We all want the things that are progressive, but we certainly want a certain modicum amount of civility. And we need to know who we can turn to if there's a problem. I don't want to have to be strapped all the time, but I tell you, as this pandemic started and all the foolishness that went on, you know, I called on you a year ago, and I asked for your advice about a problem that I was having. And I hate to even go public with that, but this is the problem. You know, you mentioned it at the inception of the program that we have an issue that we got to focus in on with regard to black on black crime. You know,
Rain, I have elderly relatives who live throughout New York City, and one of my relatives said to me, "Mark, I'm afraid to go to the store. The store is 2 blocks away. He's afraid to go outside and go to the store because he feels that he might be a victim of a crime." This is where we've gotten to in this city.
Right.
And it's a shame that
it is.
Folks can't go outside and feel safe.
You know, and I don't know. I know, Commissioner, you agree with us with respect to this. I don't know if a public service announcement on a regular basis coming from the union is going to make a difference, because it's got to be a message that people are going to pick up and that it resonates with the population. You know, your thoughts?
Well, if having been the commanding officer in 2 African American communities, the 8-1 in Bed-Stuy and 113 in Queens, it's very clear that people who look like us have very specific needs. They want to be safe. That's all there is to it.
Exactly.
They want to be able to live their lives without fear of being victims of crime, whether it's the person or when they leave their homes and their houses burgled. The police provide the service that our community needs. And when that service is provided appropriately and with respect, our communities are the biggest supporters of police and the most interested in getting more police officers in the community than anybody else is. You know, anyone who tells you they can do without the police, well, fine. You know what? Call a social worker when you have a problem, or call a sanitation worker. Police are there for a specific reason, to protect people. And when management and police believe that, and they practice that, and they make sure their subordinates do, you wind up with a great relationship between the community and the police. And it doesn't make any difference what color the police are. And it certainly helps when our folks say, hey, you're our police. We want to embrace you because you protect us. If I can digress for a second, when I was in the 113, I heard about this cop, Georgie. And all I heard about was what a wonderful cop he was. And he was in what used to be Rochdale Village. I knew it as Jamaica Racetrack. That's how far back.
Yeah, I know that. Wow.
And he was the king of Guy Brewer Boulevard. And one day while I'm sitting in my office, this guy puts his head in the door. And he says, I think you've been hearing about me. My name is Georgie. And it turned out that this police officer didn't look like us. But the people in the community were so enamored with him and felt such confidence in him that they wanted me to know he was one of the best officers in the precinct. And I think one thing we have over others is that when we find someone that we can trust and who we feel has our best interests at heart, we are colorblind. And it would be good if people who didn't look like us had the same philosophy. Because the bottom line simply is either we're going to work together and make this city safe, or we're all going to perish under the gun violence that's proliferating.
I agree, and I've seen so many instances in which that's happened in all sorts of walks of life, you know. But it's clearly a situation that really needs to be resonating out here because. I think the divisiveness will continue until there's some sort of, meeting of the minds. I don't know if this means that we have to have forums on a monthly basis where we can interact. I know the pandemic has put the kibosh on a number of those community meetings, but, we need as much support in that arena from people who are of like mind, there to do the job well, and have some sort of respect. And that brings up another subject as I think of it, the whole issue of home rule. What are your thoughts on that? Commissioner, I'll begin with you. You've had the post.
Well, it depends on how you wish to apply it, and it depends on what your philosophy is. I believe that you come into policing to make a difference. I believe that you should be part of the community, whether you live there or not. Is a matter of economics and personal choice. But the reality simply is there is a breakdown clearly in communication among members of the community, in the agencies supposed to supply services to the community, and as a result, we have a disjointed sense of communities being isolated, not feeling that they are in the mainstream, and being marginalized, and that's a difficult thing to deal with. And as a result, people think, well, if you live in this community, you'll be more sensitive to the issues. Maybe that's true. But if you look at the salaries that are being paid to police officers, most of them can't afford to live anywhere except maybe in housing projects.
I was just going to go there.
Because, I don't live in the city anymore, and I lived there for 50 years. And I started the house that my grandfather bought when he came from Barbados for $3,500. I couldn't move into now because it's on the market for $2.7 million.
I hear you.
And Bed-Stuy has the same streets it had 50 years ago, but there's a whole different populace and a whole different economic group living there. So unless the middle class is going to flourish, and those of us who work in the middle class can get incomes that will allow us to live in the city, there's no sense in talking about a residency or mandating, because it's not going to happen.
I agree. I was listening to your former colleague, who is now the distinguished mayor, Eric Adams. I think that was one of his many speeches that he gave at the beginning of his term, that he wanted to bring about a restoration of that whole concept of home residency. But living in New York, and I'm telling you as somebody who's been here all my life, now a landlord, and I'm just amazed with people. I tell people who I look for to have an income that I'm amazed that you're paying this amount of money for rent, but you need my place for a reason. And if you get the opportunity to go out and buy something, I give you every bit of credit for doing that, because the rents in New York, they're outrageous, and I don't know what, and that's another thing with the homelessness, it's like there's so, every issue seems to have a connection to another, and I don't know the answer.
Well, homelessness is my pet peeve. And I've said this in every public forum, every opportunity I have. The homeless will never get what they deserve because of a 5-letter word, money. They don't contribute to political campaigns, and many of them don't vote. So they are really not being given the respect that they deserve. And you can talk about removing them from the subways. There has to be a place for them to go. There has to be a place where they feel safe, because obviously, if you're saying you'd rather sleep in the subway station than be in a homeless shelter, then there's real problems with the homeless shelters that have not been addressed, no one's allocating funds toward it. And until you do that and get the people who were released from the mental institutions under, what was that governor's name whose son just lost his office, who put all of those folks.
Oh, yes, I know.
Close the facilities.
Right.
Until that happens and they are treated like human beings, they will continue to act out violently and hurt innocent people. And there's nobody to blame for this but the political class that doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to say, hey, even though you don't vote for me, and even though you don't contribute to my campaign, you're a human being and you deserve to have a place to stay other than a bench in the subway station.
I hear that, Mark.
The last 4 mayors have promised affordable housing for people in New York City. The last 4 mayors. Hasn't happened.
Thank you.
Hasn't happened. All right. As simple as this. New York City is for the haves and the have-mores.
That's a new one. That's a new one. And if I use it, I'm going to give you credit every time. But as I think of it, just yesterday, I believe, or the day before, our governor and the new mayor said that they've come up with this proposal to have people who are not necessarily part of the police department, I guess they'll be accompanied by some police officers, to go after the homeless population that seems to make the subways their home. Your thoughts?
I had the pleasure of working for Commissioner Chapman when he was borough commander in Manhattan North, he was the chief of patrol, and when he was the transportation commissioner. And his idea has always been, look, the homeless on the street, you got to get them off the street. Go out there, they're in the subways, do it with sensitivity, and just move them to a safe place. It is simple as that. Don't give them an option, say, I'm going to stay here tonight. Most of them, or half of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot are mental issues. Mm-hmm. You got to get them off the street, and you got to force it. Let's go, folks. The NYPD, I don't know if they still have it. They had a homeless outreach program, and under Ray Kelly, it grew, and we didn't have the homeless problem that we have today. And by the way, the homeless problem happened and came back under the de Blasio administration.
Yeah, I don't know if we could even have enough time. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
When you have inept leadership leading this city and a lot of politicians who supported a lot of his initiatives, this is where we're at today. Crime goes up, homeless issues, and this is what we got. And some of those politicians are still in office today who supported de Blasio and all his programs are now singing another song, not taking responsibility. And it's coming back and it's haunting our communities. And this, you see the result. Crime going up, people being pushed in front of trains, people being knocked in the head. I mean, I just read a story a little while ago of a 4-year-old little boy that was punched in the face in Times Square walking with his parents by a homeless person.
Yeah.
Let's get a handle on this.
And how long do you think the current measures that are being made to arrest the problem, how long do you think that will take before we'll see some sort of satisfaction?
Bill?
Well, that was it was nice to hear about this new program that was first initiated in 1994 and 95.
Oh, okay.
Now it's in its 21st century iteration. Again, it depends on the buy-in of the rank and file. You're going to put more officers on the train? Fine. What hours are they going to work? Are they going to walk up and down the trains while they're in motion? Are they going to screen the platforms? Now, when they find someone who doesn't want to cooperate, and as the leadership said, has to be removed from the system, now you lose that officer from patrolling the system to protect the greater good because he or she is dealing with one person, the miscreant, who has to be removed from the system. They've really got to think this out. I wish them luck, and I would love for there not to be any more crime in the subway and never see another police officer get hurt. But the reality is these are all speeches made by people who are not working at night and are not in the subway system protecting the people who are riding the subways.
I agree. The only thing is that I feel that a lot of New Yorkers, embraced Eric Adams because of his history as being a New York City police officer at the height of what the crisis that we were going through last year. So I don't know if he's to suffer all the blame, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of months.
Well, I think you got to give him a chance.
Yeah.
He's surrounded himself with some very smart people. And one I'm going to point out is his Deputy Mayor of Public Safety, Phil Banks, who is one of the smartest law enforcement officials that come along in the NYPD since Commissioner Chapman. And, you know, I think
I hear money being exchanged.
I think you got to give them a chance, and they will get a handle on this.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, I hate to say it, but I'm being told that we're out of time. I know we could do another hour on this, and we certainly will have to have you both back. And Mark, I have to say I'm really taken back by that Wheaties commercial you have in the back. You know, I hope they pay you well. I'm sorry I didn't think of that myself, you know. But in all honesty, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have retired Chief of Police and Commissioner Wilbur Chapman and retired New York City detective, veteran detective, Mark D. Patterson, who's well, should I talk about your current employment, or is that I'll leave it alone, you know. But if you happen to see him on the streets, please bow, genuflect. The man's got pull. All the best.
Thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. It's an honor. All right. You've been listening to the Urban Algorithm. I'm Wayne Gilman on the Our World Media Network. We thank you for giving us a view this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you didn't, as I say every time, keep it to yourself. Thank you. That wraps and ties this edition. We'll see you next time. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.
All right. All the best.